Sociology. So that tension is a very important thing that we have to look at and help coaches resolve in a positive way that contributes to the overall development of young people, rather than the development of the reputation of that coach or that club or that organization.
Yeah, I would add that a few things. Part of my work with the National Soccer Coaches Association is to run coaching courses, and some of the best coaches that I've come across in these coaching courses aren't necessarily the big name coaches or at the big name clubs or colleges or professional teams. They really they have the right balance. They understand the priorities, they understand perspective, and I think that's what oftentimes gets lost here. We get so wrapped up in, let me tell you, so from a parent standpoint, this happens in my sport, soccer. And I should tell you ahead of time, I played all sports growing up, and soccer was the very last sport that I played growing up, and it's just kind of what I fell into. And I believe coaching is coaching, and I feel like I could be as successful coaching another sport in soccer. The specifics of the sport are really pretty easy to learn. The other stuff in coaching is the harder piece to learn, how to manage people, how to motivate, how to communicate. Those are the harder things, and I think oftentimes we get that wrong. In my sport, soccer, there is this specialization that goes on at a very early age. You have to play year-round, you have to play on these teams, you have to pay all this money to play on this particular club. That, I do not believe that at all. I am not for specializing in sport at a young age at all. Maybe when you're 15 or 16, you start thinking about, okay, I want to go after this. But I think what I see at the college level is burnout, mental burnout for sure, overuse injuries. I see parents putting a lot of pressure on their children because we've invested a lot of money to play for this coach and this club, and we expect the payoff to be the college scholarship. Well, about 1% of people in youth sports get a college scholarship. So I'm not sure that's going to add up. And at a place like Santa Clara University with a $60,000 price tag, it doesn't add up even if you do get a scholarship. So we got to just change what we expect to get as a return on our investment in youth sports. I'd be quite happy with a happy, healthy kid. If my 9-year-old Jaden, who said to me this morning at breakfast, hey Dad, can I play fall ball? And I was like, well, let's talk about that. It's fall, we kind of do soccer, and the spring we kind of do baseball, but if you want to look at fall ball, we certainly can. I saw that as a real positive sign that he had a great experience last spring in baseball. He had great coaches. It was a great culture. He had a great environment there. And I think the team finished in 5th place out of 6th. I think that wasn't, and he wouldn't know that, but I think in fact that's what happened. But he had such a great experience because the coaches got it right, the parents got it right, and certainly we tried to win every game we played, but I think we had a good perspective on what we're really about. And if the return on your investment is a happy, healthy child, I think that's what we were looking for rather than X number of wins, X minutes of playing time, so many goals, or I got my college scholarship. That recipe, I think that formula's got to be shifted for sure.
I like what you were saying there, Jerry, in terms of this notion of listening to your child and what your child wants to do, and also with coaches, listening to the interests and needs of the athletes that are involved in the program. And so I think that one of those key things to keep in mind is that notion of listening to what it is that athletes want. There's been some really grand recent work that's been done by Amanda Visick and her colleagues at George Mason University, where they've looked at, with youth soccer players, what is fun about playing soccer. And the top 3 in that are that it's positive team dynamics, it's positive coaching, and they get a chance to work hard. Those are the top 3 pieces. And so those are the things that kids are interested in. And winning isn't really coming into play, but it's about development and their ability to engage and to be actively involved and to take part. And so I think it's important that we think about what it is that is developmentally appropriate for kids in terms of this idea of creating healthy and happy kids, and then we also listen to what it is that kids want.
I want the approach that when we talk about conflict of interest, it's really easy to go to the financial conflict of interest, but I really want to highlight, this is Institute for Sports Law and Ethics, and I think there really is an inherent ethical dilemma that coaches have, balancing the needs of all their kids, both as athletes and as people, and then also players want to win, and so it's a real issue. The way we've approached it with the Positive Coaching Alliance is 2 big ideas. One, it comes from Peter Senge at MIT, which is mental models. He says that every professional, attorney, police officer, teacher, in addition to learning the tricks of the trade, they get a mental model for this is how an attorney behaves, this is how a police officer behaves, this is how a coach behaves. And so we've developed this model of a positive coach is a double goal coach. First goal, trying to win. Second, more important goal, use sports to teach life lessons. And positive coaches want to win, but they never sacrifice that second life lesson goal for the first one. And then an aspirational model for athletes, triple impact competitor. What's a positive competitor? Someone who makes himself better, her teammates better, and the game better by the way he or she competes. So that idea of mental models, if we can get coaches to aspire to be double goal coaches, positive coaches. And then the second big idea is organizational culture. We like to think of ourselves as, we're John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. We do what we think is right, what we want to do. But most of us, most of the time, are pack animals. We do what our organization suggests. I thought this morning, should I wear a tie or not? And I thought, no, I don't need to wear a tie. But if I thought I needed to, I'd wear it, even though I don't like wearing ties, because I want to be, I want people to like me, and I want to be part of the organization. And so we really think the problem comes from, not from professional sports, not from big-time college sports per se, but from what we call an entertainment sports culture, where it's about entertainment, it's about winning. And so we've defined something we call the development zone culture, where it's about, yes, you're trying to win, but the goal is to develop better athletes, better people. I want to go back to something you said, Lori, when you talked about Ubuntu and caring. I first heard about Ubuntu from Doc Rivers, who's on our National Advisory Board. He famously used that term when he coached the Celtics to the NBA championship, and I think he got it from, he was on the board of Marquette University. I think he got it from a professor there. But you talked about caring climates, and you go into a group of coaches and you talk about caring and love and positive and like, oh my God, defend yourself, caring.
Okay, yes. And so often people think of caring in terms of being a soft skill, and that it doesn't really play a role. But what I would say is that within youth sport and within culture in general, is that foundational to what we do is that we care. And a lot of the other things, this notion of development zone, this notion of engaging with our players, is that it comes out of this notion that we really care for our for others. And so a lot of the work that I've done with my colleagues with Mary Fry and Maria Newton and Ms. Suk Kim and Marta Grubernow and Michelle Magyar is that what we've tried to look at is that when coaches create this caring environment, what are some of the outcomes? And so we've seen that through this association or correlational research that coaches that have more caring environments, that they tend to have athletes that have greater levels of empathy. They actually engage in caring behaviors with one another. They're more pro-social and less likely to be antisocial in their behaviors in the team, but then also in general. and that they're more likely to want to continue to be involved in the sport, and they like their teammates better and they like their coaches better, because it creates a positive team dynamic and it creates a positive coaching environment. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for that. But then the question comes, well, what do you mean to care? And so one of the things that I think is important as we look at this notion of caring is that I think coaches can set the scene. And so for me, setting the scene is that coaches are supportive, meaning that they listen to their players and that they take into consideration what their players need and what their players want. And that in terms of supporting, they're supporting the athlete's goals, not their own goals. So that their ego isn't on the line, but rather that they're considering what is in the best interest of the athlete. In terms of, the C here is that they connect. So in terms of that connection, they're getting to know their athletes because they're worth knowing. And this relates to this concept of Ubuntu, right? Is that what we are trying to do with Ubuntu is that we want to get to know another individual because they're human, and we want to embrace that humanity and also help our own humanity. And so through that interaction, we both become more human because we care and we interact with one another.
But Lori, in your work, you talk about coaches as community builders.
Yes.
And Jay, I noticed that when I reread the articles in the symposium, you talk about many athletes don't really connect to the community. They see themselves as a product of their parents and their individual skill trainers and stuff. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think, well, that's part of the implications of the new privatization, where a lot of our programs are not neighborhood-based anymore, or even community-based. So what happens is that young people are playing with people who they don't normally interact with after school and on weekends and during the summer. And what happens is that their parents are sponsoring their involvement. Unlike in the past, when you played in a park and recreation league, you were being sponsored by your community. It was your community that felt that you were important. And so you identified more with your neighborhood and community. Now, young people grow up without having that same kind of an experience unless coaches provide it for them and figure in some kind of a community connection component with their team membership. So I think that, and maybe Jerry can elaborate on this, I think that one of the things that we want our young people to do is to be good citizens. And that citizenship component is really not formally structured into a lot of our programs today, because they're